soon, welcome to my compost making masterclass. Today we're going to be learning about turning our compost piles and record keeping. When turning our compost piles, we're going to follow three simple rules. The core goes to the bottom, the top and the sides go to the core, and the bottom goes to the top. Over the course of 14 to 21 days, we'll be turning our compost pile a minimum of 3 times. If we have our recipe correct, we're likely to be doing the first turn between 3 to 6 days. That's when the temperatures should have reached the 55 degrees centigrade threshold and been able to maintain 55 degrees or above for a maximum of 3 days. When turning your pile, you'll notice that the actual material volume has decreased and therefore decrease the size of the cage slightly so that you still keep a 1-to-1 ratio of width to height of the compost in the cage when you make it for the second time. The process of turning your pile each time is exactly the same. Remember, we said core to bottom, bottom to top, top and sides to core. 2 key parameters you need to keep an eye on are temperature and moisture. We use temperatures to kill off seeds and pathogens, and we aim for a minimum temperature of 55 degrees centigrade. However, temperatures can range from between 55 to 77. Moisture should be at around 50%, and you can tell that by doing the hand squeeze test. 1 drop of water that comes through your fingers when you squeeze your compost indicates 50%. Anything less is below 50%, anything more is above 50%. Try to make sure that your compost is at 50% moisture at all times. Your first thermophilic cycle will be influenced by the quality and quantity of the party food in your pile. Within 3 to 6 days, you should actually be up in about the 60-65 range. Note down the temperature of your pile every morning and every early evening. Your compost pile will increase in temperature as the bacteria multiply and decompose materials. We calculate our turning times based on the temperature in the core. Thus, make sure your thermometer is measuring the center of the core. Let's assume that you made your pile on Monday in the morning and 3 days later in the morning the pile had reached between 55 to 57 degrees centigrade. You'd start counting 72 hours, 3 days, from this day, and you'd be expecting to turn your pile then on Thursday morning. If, however, the temperature rose to 74 degrees by Tuesday morning, you'd start counting 12 hours from this time, and then you would do your first turn. Each compost pile will behave differently. Always follow the highest threshold the pile meets at each thermophilic cycle. Your aim is to reach 3 thermophilic cycles, thus 3 turns, before your compost can be left to rest and become mature. By having reached those 3 cycles, we know that you will have pasteurized or you will have killed any seeds in the pile and killed all of the pathogens. If your pile doesn't reach these thresholds, don't worry. Learn from the materials, learn from your mistakes, think about what may have compromised the temperatures. Was it the party food? Was it the green materials? Was it the quality of each or the quantity of each? And make slight adjustments on your next pile. We're keeping records so that we can repeat the process, we can repeat the composts that are good, and we can avoid the composts that are bad or learn from those that didn't make it. The records we're going to want to keep are about the recipe, what were our materials, what were the volumes of the materials that we used. We want to keep our daily temperatures, the ambient temperature, which can impact on what a compost will do, how quickly or how slowly it will heat up, your morning temperatures, your evening temperatures, and then we also want to keep records on the moisture levels of the piles at all time to make sure that we are maintaining that 50% moisture. Let's look at a few issues of troubleshooting. So first one, what if your temperatures aren't reached for the first heating cycle? It could be that there wasn't enough moisture. The microbes need moisture. Maybe you hadn't reached that 50% mark. You need to go back to your recipe and see if you soaked your ingredients appropriately. Maybe there was too much moisture and it became compact and became anaerobic and the pile couldn't breathe, so you'll check on that. It could have had too little nitrogen, so next time you'll add a little bit more, so a little bit more party food. Or you could have had poor porosity, which would also imply you're going to get some sort of compaction, and then the pile may not heat up adequately. If your pile doesn't heat up the first time, the first cycle, look through this list, try and correct it, make the pile again, don't expect the pile to heat up. If it hasn't heated up the first time, it's not going to. So make the pile again, and you can use these materials as green and browns and then adjust, as we've just discussed, adjust the nitrogen and sometimes maybe even adjust some of those green materials as well. But especially your party food, which is that gets your temperature right up. It could also be that your compost pile is too small, it's in a very windy area, so try to stick to the 47 bucket pile that we're talking about, which gives you just a good enough volume to get the right temperatures. Anything smaller, you might have a wide surface area that, and if you're in very cool temperatures, it might not heat up because it simply can't. What if you made the first temperature but you didn't make the second temperature? And remember that we're trying to rebound to the 55-degree threshold within 24 hours of our turn. So we're trying to turn it quickly, we're trying to rebound to those temperatures as quickly as possible. But what if it doesn't happen the second time? Again, now your second threshold, your second thermophilic stage and your third are more dependent on your green materials, the quality and volumes of those. So it could be that a couple of things. First, we'll look again at moisture, not enough moisture, make sure you've got that right, too much, we've said that before, and then poor quality greens. So go back to your recipe, have a look at those. What to do if it doesn't heat up a second time, make the pile all over again, and now you can start using these materials as your brown materials, but get better quality greens and better volumes of green for your next pile. By now you'd be thinking that a 10, 30, 60 might not work for you. The materials that you have, you might need to increase the volumes of your party food as well as your greens. Do the reductions in the browns, that's not a problem, but to get those temperatures through those thresholds, it will be your party food and your greens. Oh boy, I really hope this doesn't happen, but what if you've gone through your first cycle, you've gone through your second cycle, it's happened to me, and you get to your third one and it just doesn't make it. Oh man, it is extremely frustrating. Again, it could be because there's not enough moisture, it could be because there's too much moisture, but chances are it's because you have poor quality greens more than anything else, not enough quality and volume of those greens. So what should you do? Make the pile again. Remember, you've not reached the stage where you're going to have gotten rid of all the pathogens and all of the seeds. And if you do use this pile the way it is, the chances are you will still bring those back in your fields. So if you want to make a good biocomplete compost as per the learnings that are in this masterclass, then redo the pile. It's frustrating, redo it, you'll finally get it. The process that you've gone through will really help you to understand the materials that you're working with. And it's far better to go through that process than to have got a lucky strike and got your compost right, and then for the next few times it might not happen as well and you won't know where your problems are. The other thing is smells. If your compost smells or it begins to smell, it means it's going anaerobic. It means that it's probably too wet. You're going to have to just start your pile again and adjust your materials so that you don't encounter the same problem next time. I recommend that you get a notebook and you dedicate it especially for your compost piles. And on one page you put down all the materials and the records that you can see in this small template here. And the following pages you dedicate to a template of doing your temperature and moisture records, as we'll show in the next example. This is an example of a pile that was started on the 1st of January. You can see that by day 3 the temperature threshold had reached 55 degrees and required turning 72 hours from that time, and it was turned on day 6 in the morning. The records show the turn took exactly an hour, and by the next morning at 8:30 it was back up over that 55 threshold at 62 degrees and therefore ready to wait another 72 hours. It was turned again in the morning of the 10th. The records also show that the temperature dropped to 31 degrees after that 1 hour turn on the 10th, but by the 11th in the morning at 8:30 it had bounced back up to within the threshold of 55 again, and it managed to maintain that up until the 14th for the final third turn. You can also see that the temperatures never went up above the 55 degree threshold again and slowly came down. However, if they had lingered in the 40 to 50 sort of threshold, that's still an active threshold for compost, you would either be expected to punch some holes in it with something like a broom handle and let the heat dissipate through chimneys, or do another turn after another 2 to 3 days just so that the pile doesn't go anaerobic, and then leave the pile to slowly come to maturity. You're probably wondering how long it will take before your compost is ready to use. On the light side, it will be ready to use in a minimum of about 3 months. That's what I've seen here in Kenya. It could take a lot longer if you're in a much colder area or you're making compost during the cold season, because the biological activity will slow down due to temperatures. Leaving it longer does result in more biological microbial diversity, which is also a great thing to do if you have time. Or just make 2 piles. Have one that you might want to use with less diversity because you need it immediately, and another that you can use with more diversity but you've left over a longer period of times. Signs that your compost are ready. You can't see or recognize the starting materials in the pile. You might have a few wood chips that are still breaking down, but nothing much else. Your compost smells like earth. It's attracting earthworms. And once your pile has reached ambient temperature, you can actually toy with adding earthworms to it. And that can be fun as well. They'll be happy to stay in there and add to the microbial diversity and give you some really great biocomplete compost to work with for your extracts or your teas. Using compost that is still active can actually damage your seeds and your plants, so it's a really good idea that you check and test that your compost is ready before you use it. The Crest Test is a very simple test to do. You take some cress seeds, or you can take other microgreens like kale or cabbages or radishes. Radishes are good to use. Bring a small amount of compost up to 50% moisture in a jar and with a lid. Only about 1/3 of the jar full. Put the compost in, sprinkle some seeds in and put the lid on it and leave it to see if it germinates. If it germinates and the little plants, the seedlings grow, your compost is ready. If it germinates and they die, it means that there are noxious gases that are still coming off your compost that will damage any seeds or any plants that you put your compost, or any roots that you put your compost on. So very good test to do. Use radish or kale seeds to do it. It's really important to store your compost well. Store it in a well-ventilated area. You can let the moisture levels go down to 35 to 45. Check often and add a little bit of water. You don't want it to dry out. Before you use it, dampen it back up to 50% moisture for a few days, maybe before you use it, just to wake up all the dormant microbes. You can use this wonderful compost now to make great extracts and teas.